Thank you very much for joining us to talk about consumer involvement in CP Achieve. At first, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Michelle McInerney, who was recently awarded her doctorate with no amendments required. Congratulations, Michelle. By way of introduction, my name's Margaret Wallen. I'm a lecturer in occupational therapy at the Australian Catholic University in North Sydney. I'm a researcher in the fields of cerebral palsy with a great interest in consumer involvement in research. And I'm very privileged to lead the consumer theme as part of CP Achieve. It gives me great pleasure to also introduce you to Sevastine Katsakis, who's employed by CP Achieve as a consumer project officer, is a woman with cerebral palsy and a clinical counsellor. I'm going to speak first and talk about some of the practicalities of consumer involvement in CP Achieve, and then Sev will follow up with really bringing to life what consumer involvement means. For CP Achieve, our definition of consumer is adolescents and young adults with cerebral palsy and their parents and families and significant support people. Consumer involvement is an embedded theme in CP Achieve. From the very outset, we undertook to have consumers involved in all aspects of our work. So we are governed by a steering group, and Joan Gaines, a community coordinator, is part of that. The consumer involvement theme, along with the participation theme, economic theme, and workforce development, are overarching themes for CP Achieve. And so each of those themes aims to make sure that those themes are embedded into the activities of CP Achieve. We have two main programs of research: improving physical and mental health and building supportive environments. And under each of those programs is a number of research studies. And our aim is to have consumers as researchers in each of those projects, as advisory groups, and importantly to have an investigator or investigators who are tasked with making sure that the consumers are involved authentically and well. We have a number of values in relation to consumer involvement, and just some of them I'll be able to speak to today. We believe that consumers should be involved very early in, if not at the beginning of each research project, so that they are really involved in setting the direction of each research project, research questions, priorities, and so on, and are involved in each stage of the research cycle through to the very important part of making sure that the right information about the findings of our studies are disseminated to the right people at the right time to make a difference to practice and clinical services. Flexibility to accommodate differing availability and strengths and interests of consumers are important to us. And we aim to provide support to consumers to give them the opportunity to be involved as they would like to be. We also believe that being involved to consumers should benefit consumer researchers as well as the research and the researchers. So part of enabling these values is this understanding of options for levels of influence that allows flexibility. We have a number of consumers who we send newsletters to with updates on information, and we hope that they will be engaged and become confident to take on other roles with more levels of influence on our research. So our advisory groups operate at the level of advisor, and consumers who are embedded in our individual projects are operating at the level of partner there. So far, we've developed an involvement plan which outlines our values and principles in relation to consumer involvement, what we'd like to achieve and how and why. We've established CP Unite, an advisory group of young adults with cerebral palsy, and a mentor program to support them in those roles. And we're currently starting to work on ways to involve parents and families and adolescents in an advisory capacity, and also those consumers to be involved directly in the research project. So we aim to have infrastructure and resources to carefully support both researchers and consumers to enable those roles. And evaluation underpins everything that we do. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our CP Unite Young Adults Advisory Group. We've had 2 meetings so far. The first we felt it was very important to be a preparation and orientation meeting so that these people could get to know us and each other. And we talked about the research cycle and levels of influence, and really reassured and empowered them, hopefully, that it was their lived experience, their voice, that was important to us in informing our research. And our second meeting with CP Unite was with the participation theme, and made a profound difference to the way that that theme was viewing some of the issues that they are researching. So thank you to CP Unite. I'd also like to thank and introduce the mentors. So these are postdocs and PhD scholars as part of CP Achieve who have volunteered to be mentors. They are carefully matched with CP Unite advisors who chose to have a mentor, and not all did. We put them in contact with one another and then they negotiate their relationship. It may be as simple as reassuring them that they're on the right direction and, you know, comfortable to be involved in meetings, through to helping prepare responses and get their thoughts in order for the meeting. So thank you to our mentors. We want consumers involved in all of our research because we know that it adds value to the research, to our experiences as researchers, and also to end users. So the people with cerebral palsy, their families, other stakeholders, clinicians, that we hope the findings of our research will influence. I've just listed some of those advantages here. But I'm now going to pass over to Sev to really speak to the consumer perspective of consumer involvement in CP Unite. Over to you, Sev.
Thank you, Margaret. I would like to begin my section with a personal reflection of cerebral palsy and what CP means to me. Just a small disclaimer before I begin, that this is my personal experience and everyone with CP has a different experience based on their individual needs and circumstances. However, I would like to share my experience for the purposes of this presentation to connect with you not only as a member of CP Achieve, but also as a consumer. From a very young age, I was able to turn the experience of having CP from a so-called negative into a positive. What do I mean by this? I mean that I stopped seeing it as a barrier to accessing the typical functioning world, and rather focused on what I could do to make it work for me instead of against me. I have now reached a point in my life where I see it as my biggest gift. And yes, even though this is true, I have also realized that my earlier perceptions of CP were a coping mechanism to help me deal with, function in, and understand the typical functioning world where it is normal to say things are just the way they are. However, with research like CP Achieve, things are going to get much better. Next slide, please. My next slide is entitled The Meaning of Connection, Belonging and Understanding. Margaret has covered these 2 points in her previous slides. However, I've got them down as well because I would like to highlight that by consumers contributing to the research, their voices being heard, and their opportunity to make a difference with people who have CP and their families, this is quite meaningful. And I can't begin to describe to you the feeling of living with a condition, experiencing it, and being able to make a positive impact to other families and consumers as well that are going through the same thing. This brings me to my next slide. CP consumer involvement within CP Achieve. As I mentioned previously, making a difference is important. And this is also done by entering the CP community through the research. For some people with CP, it can be quite isolating functioning in the mainstream world. So it is also a reassuring experience meeting others in similar situations. For me personally, entering the CP community once I got my position here with CP Achieve, it gave me a sense of belonging as I continually realized what was missing in my life, and that was connecting with people who resonated with my own experience. My second point on the slide is influencing, closing the gap in healthcare and building supportive environments for people with CP. It is important for consumers to support research as to make sure that the real needs of people with CP and their families are heard and acted on. The third point here refers to the ways of influencing with regards to the researchers' perspectives. So prioritizing research questions, what's important for people with CP and their families, documentation, developing different interventions, collecting the data, and making sure the data findings are shared appropriately. If I can speak on an example of this, it would be the recent consumer theme meeting that we had with our CP Unite, a participation theme meeting. And our advisors actually identified key areas that were priority in their life. These areas were relationships, advocacy, and parenting. Without the help of CP Unite, these areas wouldn't have been thought of by the researchers and now can be highlighted and explored. Next slide, please. This brings me to our roles, the community coordinator role and my role as the project officer. My role with the community coordinator during games is very closely correlated. These positions are funded and included within CP Achieve to ensure that consumer involvement is effectively implemented and monitored. This also includes making sure that consumers are well supported in their roles that they undertake throughout their research. We are responsible for facilitating various groups within CP Achieve, such as the Young Adults Advisory Group, Consumer Network, Mentors Program, and a parental group in the future. We also facilitate the relationship between the researchers and the consumers and encourage that positive relationship. This brings me to the benefits to young people and adolescents with CP of being involved within the research. As Margaret mentioned to these before, networking amongst themselves and meeting other people who have CP also, as well as networking with the researchers, allows them to develop new skills, and it is something that we can provide input on their resume with, and also importantly gives them a sense of contribution and achievement. We believe that consumers should be acknowledged for their involvement and also paid for it as well. Finally, how to get involved. Please feel free to contact either myself or Margaret. Our emails are on the screen, or you can contact the main CP Achieve at mcri.edu.au for any further details. And please also connect with us to stay updated on any of our activities. Thank you.